It is Monday. Let's get into the news. This is the first official news. There was a video I released a couple of weeks ago, which was more of the best and worst news of 2023. Not actually discussing new news.
Slow news day.
So I don't necessarily count that as a news video per se, but this is the first one. There's also just not really been a whole lot of news yet this year. There's not been, but we're back. And with all the hits. We have two bits of news today, so we'll go over them. One of them actually is from a couple of weeks ago, so it's kind of older, but we'll discuss it anyway. We'll deliberate. We'll open up a platform for debate in the comments, all these things. And then the other item is a bit newer, and they're both relatively interesting. It's kind of following the same vein of a lot of the news from the later portion of last year, which was new camera and new film. So we'll get into the new camera bit because it is kind of interesting. It's something that I've thought of for a while. Specifically, I think if Olympus did this, they would just make so much money. But it is this company called Mint, and basically what they're doing is they're co-opting the old Rollei 35S camera system, and they're just putting new shit in it to make it work. They're calling it the Rollei 35 AF, which means it's going to have autofocus. It's using the LiDAR autofocus system. I'm not sure really what that means. I don't really mess a whole lot with autofocus, but apparently it works really well. They're also including a integrated flash unit into the camera, which is pretty nice. I'm relatively familiar with the Rollei 35. It's a very, very small camera. Like it is teeny tiny. It's hard to do this with only like one hand. It's very small. It's a small thing. They're cool. They look really cool. Apparently the focusing system on them is very difficult to get used to. I've not shot with one, so I can't really speak to that too much. But they're a pretty sought after camera for some people. It's one of those like kind of a niche gimmicky things that people really like. And not to say that's a bad camera because it's a gimmicky camera, just that either people know about it and they absolutely love it, they know about it and they don't like it, or they don't know about it. And that's just kind of how a lot of the film cameras go. The new model is supposed to be, I think it was $600 to $850 is the price range that they're probably going to release it at, which is fair because I think the older ones are still going for like $300, $400. So if you're going to be putting in a bunch of extra technology into that and making it a bit more user friendly, then I think it's fair to bump up the price. My thought would be if Olympus came back and brought out like an XA or the XA2, they would make just all of the money. Like, imagine just going to get a new XA. I'm going to go buy a new XA that just came out. Comes in a little box. It comes with the display case thing with the flash. Like, that'd be so sick. And it would be great because like that's what people want most of the time. They just want a pocketable little point and shoot. But I digress. That's probably not going to happen. So instead, this is what we get. We get Mint, who I believe is a company that's been releasing cameras, a lot of like the reusable, disposable cameras, stuff kind of similar to that. Yeah, they're going to do this, which is fine, which is cool, which is dandy. So moving on. I guess in terms of like my level of interest in it, mid to low, I would say. I think I have enough cameras, generally speaking, that I don't really need to add new ones onto the mix. If I was given the opportunity to test it, I would definitely be more than happy to do so. But for the most part, it just doesn't really appeal to me all that much. There's probably going to be a lot more information to unpack, which I'm looking forward to. And I'll probably be keeping up to date on it as much as I can because it is an interesting development. It's one of the first like major steps to bringing back an actual film camera and not a reusable disposable or not something that's like gimmicky in a way. So hopefully what this does is it becomes like a productive thing that Mint then rolls into the production of another camera down the line and continues the investment moving forward. Speaking of continuing the investment moving forward, Adox, which is a film company you probably have not heard of. A lot of people haven't. Of course, the people who subscribe to my channel are super smart, so they probably have heard of it and already know what I'm about to talk about. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you too are super smart. But Adox is coming out with a new color film, which is interesting. Last year, they released Color Mission 200, which was noted for its minty greens and purples and something or another. I'm not entirely sure. Apparently cooler toned photos. And the idea behind this like limited release film is kind of the same that Harman had, or I guess Harman's idea was the same that Adox had, because Adox did it first, whatever, was that they would take the money that was made off of people buying this film and roll it towards making newer and newer emulsions. Few times in the past, it seems that Adox has tried to make color emulsions with other companies that have gone bankrupt in the midst of production. So they're like, nah, we're going to try it ourselves. And in doing so, they've released, or one and about to release another film, which is exciting, which is interesting. And this other film that they are hoping to release is controversial, I would say. It's quite controversial. It is a ISO 3 color film. Yes, 3. Very, very low. For those that don't know, which I don't blame you if you don't know, but the number of ISO, or the ASA number, whatever, is kind of a representation of that film's sensitivity to light. So the higher the number, the more sensitive it is to light. So the less light you need to make a proper exposure. The lower the number, the more light you need. And, you look at like a common film, like a Cinestill 50D. You're like, oh, that's a pretty slow film. That needs a lot of light. You look at something like an Hector 100. Whoa, that's very slow. You need a lot of light there. Any one of these films that are like 50 speeds, 100 speed, even 200 speed in some cases is pretty slow. Like you need a lot of like bright sunny conditions, especially with color film, to like really bring out the vibrancy of the colors and to not mute too much of the detail. Three. I'll link a video that I made not too long ago. I believe I was shooting with like 8 or 6 speed film. It's very confusing. I don't really remember what it was, but it was black and white. I got some really interesting results from that. Very contrasty film. This film looks to be not that. It looks to be a little bit more pasteled, washed out, low contrast. Kind of low detail, if I'm honest, which is worrying. But 3-speed film is going to mean a lot of long exposures. Now, Adox did come out and say, hey, listen, I hear what you're saying, but bright sunny day, pretty fast lens, you can shoot at a normal shutter speed. You don't even need a tripod. Come here. Here in Portland, there's maybe 2 or 3 bright sunny days in the year. That ain't happening. Now, I know that, not all film photographers live in Portland. There's many people that have spread out like a parasite across all of the countries and stuff. Film photography just isn't located in dark, dingy places like Portland here. But if I was to buy that film, it is going to be exclusively long exposure photography, and during daylight hours too, nonetheless, which is interesting. That is an interesting thing. I just don't know about it yet. I think I'll probably try. I'll just give it a try. See how it shakes out. If anything, just to continue to support a company that's obviously trying out new things and trying to bring back color film. That's really exciting and impressive. That's a hard thing. I can't even imagine how difficult that is to start from the ground. Well, they do make black and white film, so not necessarily the ground, but I think color film is a completely different beast. So to start from where they're at and to try to produce stuff like that's impressive, worth celebration, and at the very least, I think worth trying. But it's going to be tough. And I think the comments on the article that I read were a little unfair. I think the general consensus is people don't like the idea of it, which I get. I'm not like jumping over the moon for this film. It looks very warm. There was a lot of comments calling it similar to Harmon Phoenix, which based on the 3 pictures, I don't know if I necessarily disagree with it, but I don't see it as like a direct correlation. I think that there's a lot less contrast than the Phoenix film, and I think that there's a lot better retention of the highlights and the shadows, but I do see a lot of like the washed out detail due to the low saturated colors. There's not a lot of like grain sharpness necessarily. And I don't know, it's just a weird thing. It's a weird thing. And that's why I'd say it's controversial, because if I were to tell you, hey, a new color film is coming out, people would be like, oh, that's awesome. Like, yes, fantastic. But it's like, hey, a new color film is coming out. 3 speed. Everyone's like, what? And I feel like it was kind of the same with the Phoenix thing, where it's like, hey, new color film's coming out. I was like, oh, that's awesome. It's experimental. What? So I don't really know how I feel about this, to be honest. I think I'm kind of talking myself out of the hype for it as I discuss it more, as I kind of mull it over a bit more. And I think I'm more interested in the days and hoping that they're coming in which we can just say, hey, there's new color film coming out. And everyone's just like, nice, can't wait. And there's no little asterisks. There's no caveats. There's no... I had a coworker he said caveat, and then he said, what did he say? He pronounced it 2 different ways. He said, yeah, sometimes just mixed up, and it was hilarious. But anyway, there's no asterisks. It's just, hey, this is coming out, and it's good. I'm looking forward to that. But for now, I am genuinely just excited to see new stuff. I'm hoping for it. I'm pulling for it. And I will probably try to shoot a roll of it just to see, for kicks and giggles. And we'll see how it shakes out. Overall, I'm not like too invested one way or another. Just interested, I would say. But that's it, I think, for this video. I don't really have any other news to discuss. I've got a lot of work to get back to, so I'm going to do that now. Hopefully, there'll be news next week. If not, there won't be a video, because I don't really want to just do news videos where I try to make up news. I kind of wanted this series to be a consistent thing, but I also completely forgot that there are just days and weeks in which news does not really occur. So the news maybe shouldn't be a regular thing. Maybe it should just be hey, as news comes up, there might be a news video on Monday. Who knows? Still working out the kinks of that component, but for the most part, that's where we're at. Pretty stoked about things happening, though, and hopefully more things will happen, and we can talk about that in the future.